Today's question is, Scott, I know you're big on conversational hypnosis. How do you speed up conversational hypnosis, and what are the best language patterns that you focus on? So it's a good question. So how do we speed up conversational hypnosis? Well, I can only give you my version of conversational hypnosis, which is probably going to be a stark difference to what people think when they, or what they conclude when they think of conversational hypnosis. And I can tell you've sort of done that as well. Language patterns is not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about overloading a client with language patterns, Ericksonian patterns. I'm not talking about overloading someone with language and confusion. That's not the type of conversation hypnosis I'm talking about. That's language patterns. That's the script stuff. That's the traditional rigid techniques. I'm not talking about that. So what I'm talking about when it comes to conversation hypnosis is how can we, for lack of better words, use some sort of conversation where it's going to create unconscious moments where a client can have a quick breakthrough. That's just a real high level view of what I'm talking about. If you want to see more of what that actually looks like, just go through this YouTube channel. You'll see some conversation hypnosis demo breakdowns of the type of therapy that we do. So how do we speed it up? So I think the two biggest blocks when it comes to using conversation hypnosis, just the style that I'm talking about, is this. We want the therapy and the conversation hypnosis, the trance, we want it to happen very, very quickly. Okay. So at the act of trying to make things quicker, we now put a lot of pressure on ourselves to perform. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves to apply some sort of technique that has some sort of outcome. And by doing this and putting pressure on yourself, you stop the actual client from going into trance the way that they go into trance. So my whole point with this first part is you want to slow down in order to speed up. Sure, people can see how quickly conversation hypnosis can happen, but when you're so busy trying to make something happen, you're so busy trying to solve your client's problem or force them down some sort of language pattern, you're now telling your client what to do. And it's very, very hard for a client to have a massive therapeutic breakthrough when you're trying to control the whole thing. So number one block, take the pressure off yourself, slow down, don't force your clients into anything. Number two is actually, it sort of ties into number one as well. When it comes to the actual therapy, I'm not talking about conversation hypnosis just for someone to feel trance. I'm talking about actual therapy work, is this. Don't solve your client's problem. Again, if you go into a session presuming that you know what a client's problem is, presuming or concluding that you have an answer to your client's problem, or you know the breakthrough that they need, now you're forcing your client down the road that you want them to go. Okay, and it gets very tricky at that point because now you're trying to perform. And again, you're going to put pressure on yourself to try and work things out. So when I went into a session, I concluded nothing. The only thing I did was work out, okay, I'm going to ask my client, firstly, what's the problem? And they're going to tell me something. I don't know what I'm going to say next. I don't know what technique I'm going to use, what strategy, which way I'm going to go down, where the unconscious mind's going to show up, how deep that go. I don't know any of those things. I don't presume any of those things because I want to utilize what my client gives me instead of me giving them what I think is best for them. Very, very hard for us to try and force our clients down the road that we want them to go based on a technique that we have for them, because now we're just guessing. We're limiting our clients' ability for them to solve their own problem. So when I'm talking about conversational hypnosis, quite an advanced mindset is to say, like, we're not using techniques, we're not using strategies, I'm not concluding anything. I'm literally going into a session with like a blank mind thinking, okay, I'm going to say something, they're going to say something, and I'm going to investigate why their problem exists. I'm not going to try and work out how to solve it. I'm not going to tell them what to do. I'm not going to deepen them. I'm not going to use techniques or strategies. All I want to find out is, why does their problem exist? And the cool thing is, when you go into a session like this, now there's no prep work. It always astounds me when people say, Scott, I've got to do like an hour's prep work before a session. And I think, okay, there's a couple of things wrong with that. One, you're taking a lot of time to prep for something you don't know what's going to happen. Sure. And people say, well, Scott, I'm prepping for my client's anxiety. Well, how do you know your client has anxiety? That's the symptom. If you've only worked that out over like a strategy call, or they booked you in for an anxiety session, the client is telling you their symptom. So what are you preparing for? You can't prepare for the symptom. And that's why a lot of those traditional type trainings, traditional techniques are so hit and miss, because now you're trying to apply a technique beforehand to a symptom that's not the actual root cause. The root cause doesn't come out just because you put them in trance. They don't connect those things to the root cause because they're in trance. They connect the things or find out what the root cause is by you investigating what the problem is. So I'm not solving the problem. I'm not putting my pressure on myself to perform, sorry. What I'm doing is trying to figure out, why does that problem exist? And that's all I'm doing. I'm investigating the mindset of the problem and trying to figure out, okay, they've got this problem. I don't have this problem in my life. I wonder why it exists. I'm not going to try and solve it. As soon as I try and solve it, I'm in fix-it mode. And now I'm going to put pressure on myself to perform. And I'm going to put pressure on myself to get results. And the funny thing is, the harder you try and work for clients' results, the less results they'll get, because now you're going to force them down the way that you want them to go based on your knowledge. So it's quite a bit of backwards thinking. So I actually forgot what the question was, but hopefully that answers the question. It was to speed up conversation hypnosis. Yeah, so get away from the traditional language patterns and overloading and the Ericksonian confusion, all that stuff. Go check out some of the conversation hypnosis demos we have in this channel. That will give you a better understand what I'm talking about when we say conversation hypnosis. And number two, don't put pressure on yourself to perform. Don't try and solve your client's problem. Instead, investigate the mindset, investigate why their problem exists, and you'll find that the breakthroughs they'll get are extremely quick. Thus, you'll speed up the effect of using conversation hypnosis. So hopefully that answers your question. And guys, I'll see you in the next one.